What happens when neurodiversity meets a world designed for only one kind of brain? In today's podcast, Shaun Deardorff shares how being bullied for neurodivergence shaped his nervous system, identity, and drive. We unpack three key insights. Number one, how neurodiverse brains process sensory input differently, increasing overwhelm in everyday environments. Number two, why hyperfocus and pattern recognition are cognitive strengths, not deficits. And number three, how perfectionism forms as an adaptive response to exclusion and how it can be reframed. This episode challenges how we understand neurodiversity, resilience, and success. So listen in. Welcome to Success Reimagined. I am Dr. Amna Shabbir, your host on this journey to thrive at the intersection of ambition and wellness. In every episode, I'll help you challenge outdated definitions of success, discover practical tools and strategies for growth without compromising your well-being. I am so glad you've joined me. Let's reimagine what's possible together. Today's guest is Shaun Deardorff, a PhD candidate in aerospace engineering at NC State, entrepreneur, drone filmmaker, and changemaker. Shaun delivered a TEDx talk titled Turning Obstacles into Superpowers, where he reframed his experiences with neurodivergence, including autism, not as limitations, but as unique strengths and avenues for creative problem solving. Over the years, Shaun has built Airmage Media Productions, aerial photography, videography, and blended his passion for flight engineering and storytelling. His journey is a powerful example of resilience, identity, and reclaiming what others might label as obstacles. I had the honor of witnessing this talk live in the audience, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shabbir. The honor to be on here and share my story a little more with other people so other people can hopefully resonate and feel inspired to go take it into their own life and be a positive change in the world.
When I was just listening to you talk about this part of your journey, there were many parts that I just felt deeply moved with. So I'm going to step back and invite you to share your journey with our audience and why you chose to tell it on the TEDx stage.
Yeah, so I've been wanting to kind of share my story for the last 5, 8, 10 years. It's something that's very personal to me, and I've only really ever shared with like close family and some friends. But I just feel like so many other people are in the same boat and are in the shadows and have a similar story, maybe not as crude as what I might have had to experience and the adversity I've had to overcome. But I thought that by sharing my story, I could at least inspire others to kind of reframe where they are at and help get them out of like the rut or kind of flip the script and change their perspective about what can be instead of what can't be. So it kind of started back in middle school and all the way back in honestly elementary school. So being on the spectrum, it's always hard to make friends and socially. So people aren't really familiar with what autism spectrum is like. You can kind of think of it as like a wheel, and there's like different like spokes and chunks that are thicker than others that people with an autistic brain have different strengths in. So for me, my strengths are kind of within like the creative part of the wheel and math and science. So I have a very creative brain, very active creative brain. And that's also naturally good at math and science and critical thinking in that capacity. But what's a common thing for most people on the spectrum is the social aspect. The social relation is usually kind of more of a deficit. And something that's really unique to people on the spectrum who have a brain that's kind of wired differently through the spectrum itself, we're very empathetic and emotional beings. And some might say more so than neurotypical people. We feel emotions a lot more raw than maybe the average person, but we don't have the same social script to be able to decipher how to relate that to other people, which means that we miss out on a lot of social cues. And it's kind of hard to kind of fit that puzzle piece into the rest of the normalized social script of society, which makes it really hard to make friends. And it's something I've struggled with my whole life. And small talk felt like speaking a whole different language. So it kind of took the realization of, I went to counselors and therapists and they really didn't help. And it took me to be like, you know what, let me try my own strategy and how I can reapproach this and use my unique strengths and interests and passions into a way to make friends into that challenge. And that kind of started with the idea of, what if I like, for me, learned a bunch of skills. And I feel like I hate small talks. And what if I had, maybe learned a skill that maybe that should be like, your hobby, whatever happened to be your hobby too. It's like, oh, look, now it's not just, oh, what's the weather like tomorrow? Or how's weather's nice. Oh, it's nice. And oh, that's okay, cool. And then that dies there. It's like, oh, okay, what makes you tick? What makes you thrive? What makes you want to wake up every morning? What makes you excited to be here on this blue and green marble we call home? And it's like cutting straight to that really allows that unique perspective to be shared and find stuff in common on a deeper level. And so that led me to learn different skills through artwork and origami and scuba diving, skydiving, flying, magic tricks, card coding, languages, instruments, various skills and interests that I had a personal interest and passion in, but then that allowed me to connect deeper with people that I met and we could like connect instantly. And I felt that allowed me to kind of overcome that initial challenge and find my place and who I am. And also like in middle school, I've been bullied throughout my whole life. Middle school's rough for anyone. I think we can all look back at middle school and be like, it sucks. High school gets better. But for me, it also kind of sucked because I got bullied a lot too. But there is kind of the people who watched my TED Talk have been like, oh, what's the aha moment maybe in middle school that I talk about? And it's kind of there's a moment that I felt really lonely in middle school. I felt really alone and I would cry to myself about being alone because I felt like people didn't want to be with me. They thought that I was like or weird, and it's not the case. I mean, it's just called having, we're in a different world, and people don't know really what that world's like. So that's what led me to want to, be like, I really want to share this with the world because I feel like the world needs to hear what it's like to be in our world. It's a different world from everyone else, and we have a unique privilege to be able to live in this unique world that other people don't have the opportunity to. But I think what makes my story different than a lot of other people is that I've worked so hard to overcome these obstacles and challenges that I've been really fortunate to develop the communication skills that other people on the spectrum don't always have the opportunities to cultivate and to have. A lot of people who lack those social skills are kind of like lost in their own head and aren't able to communicate what it's like. And I feel like I have like a God-given gift to be able to have a platform to share my story and help others. And I want to do that as much as I can here. Not only to help create a place for for conversation for people with ADHD or autism or ADD, but for people who are neurotypical, who don't know much about the autism spectrum or ADD. And most of all, I want to use this platform now to become more of a public activist to inspire others to create a more inclusive, supportive, and understanding global community.
Thank you for sharing that, Shaun. I want to double click on what you said. So take us to that world. And there are parts of your TEDx talk, and it's an amazing talk. We're going to link to it in the show notes. So if you're listening, I highly encourage you to actually go listen to Shaun's TEDx talk. There's a part that in which you describe that sensory experience for yourself, and I will be very honest with you. I learned so much from that very simple way in which you described it. So what does your world look like right now?
Yeah, so kind of a little taste of that is, I mean, I had someone just the other day be like, I had the first person kind of disagree with my TED Talk. They were like, they didn't think or believe that that humans think differently from one another. Their take on it was that everyone thinks the same way, that neurodivergence does not exist. Everyone's brain is wired the same way. They don't believe that the concept that brains can be wired differently. And I mean, I can obviously agree to disagree because, like, I mean, it's very clear people have different interests and passions and want to express themselves in different ways, and that kind of all extends back to the fact that we have different brains and different interests, and we process information differently. And so, like, if we watch the same TV show, you might interpret it one way, and I might completely miss that concept and interpret it a whole different way. And that's what makes humans so amazing, is that we have different perspectives. That what's, a workplace, that's what makes like a place like, Google so unique, is that you have so many different unique minds from so many different backgrounds, culturally or identity or personality wise, that makes them so unique. Because if you just had 100 Joes that all thought the same way, that company would be so boring. Like, it wouldn't go anywhere. Innovation, as I say in my talk, happens when someone sees what no one else sees. And that takes a different brain. I mean, you think about like the greatest innovators in history, like I mentioned, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Bill Gates, all these people, what makes them so different? Why were they able to invent stuff and start companies? It's because they thought differently than other people. They didn't think like everyone else. They saw the world differently a little bit. And that's kind of what it's like for me, is that it's a very overstimulating world. I think we can all agree. If for me, if you place me in Times Square, I probably want the hell out of there, because like it's kind of it's crazy. It's a stimuli overload. It's a lot going on, and it's hard to process that if you don't know how to. And like I say in the talk, you're in Times Square, you got blaring sirens going around, people screaming and yelling, and people nearly getting hit by cars. And then you got like billboards screaming out, and bright lights and flashing lights and food and smells and all that. It's a lot going on. And it's for someone with a neurodivergent brain, or someone who's on the spectrum, that's all at the same level. And it's really hard to prioritize certain stimuli. And it's a huge challenge to be able to say, okay, yeah, that billboard, let me tune out all this other noise and focus on that, so I can really listen in and see what that's saying. Or that person who's yelling across the street. Let me tune out all this other noise, all this chaos, and turn up what that one person's saying, and focus on that. And that might be really easy for someone who might have a more neurotypical brain. But for someone on the spectrum or has ADHD, it's hard to do so, and you can get distracted very easily, and it's overwhelming. But nonetheless, one of the superpowers that I talked about is hyperfocus, or sensitivity to detail. So on the flip side, having an autistic brain, or someone who has ADHD, we can do something that's called hyperfocus, or and we have a acute sensitivity to detail, meaning if you show me two pictures side by side, I can pretty much immediately tell you what's different. I know I have partial photographic memory, so if I stare at a page long enough, I can memorize that full page verbatim. And these are just how our brains are kind of wired, and it's really fascinating to use that. But learning how to use that is the challenge, and that's kind of what I say in the talk a little bit. Is more about people who have ADHD, you have the ability to hyper focus, meaning if you have a deadline, let's say in an hour, you could crunch that out in probably 10 minutes if you hyper focus. But also the flip side, if you have ADHD, you get, distracted very easily. So then it might take you the full hour, but you could, you dawdle until you have 10 minutes left, and then you can crank out the whole thing in 10 minutes. Whereas a normal person might take a lot longer. So it takes a certain mindset to train those abilities, but nonetheless, we process the information differently than someone who might view it the more standard or traditional. Um,
And in your talk, you talked about a specific incident that you started with, and I was just blown away that that would be a possibility that would actually happen to another human. Can you talk about that a little bit if you feel comfortable?
yeah, so as I said, I've been bullied my whole life, and unfortunately, bullies are part of everyone's kind of childhood life. It usually happens when someone is jealous of someone else, and they want to make themselves feel better by putting the other person down. And I don't know what happened with this person. We're just going to call him A. And so it kind of happened, freshman year, when A held, I guess, a grudge against me, and kind of carried on, several years later, and ultimately ended up in a joke of him photoshopping me out of the team photo. I was on the ultimate frisbee team in high school, and we won the state championship my sophomore year. And when the yearbook team asked for our team picture, pretty much they sent in the photo of me, and I ended up being photoshopped out of my high school yearbook. I don't know if it was just supposed to be a joke, but it's not, because hundreds of people have that yearbook copy from that year, and I will never be in that photo. My name's on the page, but you could literally see my hands on my teammates' shoulders, and my face and my body is missing. And I was making a joke. I was like, well, if you're going to Photoshop me, yeah, at least do the proper job and Photoshop my hands too. I mean, it's kind of weird to leave my hand just floating there. But, that being said, absolutely cruel to do that, because that's not only going to, what might have turned into a joke, a really cruel joke in a group chat, whatever, is now public for the entire world to see. And I incorporate it into my TED Talk. So, it sucks to suck, I guess, but, maybe he might be famous, but in the wrong ways. But that just goes to show how nasty humans can be when we don't truly understand and see eye to eye, and we can see from the other person's perspective. And I think this goes for a lot of different scenarios, whether different mindsets, different personalities, or different cultures and identities. I think it's really important to put yourselves in other people's shoes and see from their perspective. And I think if that happened more often, we would avoid a lot more conflict, because we would be more receptive and understanding of people who are different than us. And obviously, A didn't think of it like that, and he chose violence, and chose to put me down to make himself feel better. Well, in the moment that really hurt me and it set me back, I didn't let that stop me. And furthermore, I didn't want to let that one moment define who I was. And so that's when I kind of worked hard and doubled down to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna let that, dictate my future, who I am, and what I'm capable of doing. I'm gonna keep doing, expressing my passions, and my outlook on life is to, make the world a better place. If I can just leave this world making one positive change to help inspire, change someone else's life, and make the world a little bit better, I've done my job. And so I really wanted to just, focus on that and rewrite that yearbook page without myself in it, rewrite it on my own terms, push myself back into the frame on my own terms. So what, initially started as a really cruel or a nasty joke and an incident, which I hope no one should ever experience. I mean, people would joke about being photoshopped out of a yearbook, but it actually happened to me. I hope it never happens to anyone else. But also, if stuff does happen like that, don't let it define you. You're more than that. There's more to life than that. We're just a small speck in this microcosm of this universe, and the grand scheme of things didn't really matter. But that's okay. It pushed me to be better and to help make others better. And now I can use this story to help empower, inspire others who might have a similar story or background or an incident like that, to let them not let that define who they are, and push them to unlock their full potential.
You have clearly taken the bricks that others have thrown at you and built a castle from them. So I am so inspired by that story, equally like shocked, horrified, and inspired by how you have actively put yourself back in the frame. What other advice would you give to our neurodivergent audience members who are listening right now in terms of embracing their strengths and really leaning into them?
Yeah, I think what really, I mean, obviously this is going to be different for every person. People watching my talk, it's not necessarily like a verbatim recipe of like, oh, if you have ADHD or autism, I have both. So like, it may not be the same thing. If you're cooking a recipe or a chef, you can tailor it to your needs. And also, obviously, I always want to use it as a template. Kind of an essence of what you could do. But regardless, people have obstacles in their life, and for neurodivergent individuals, there's a lot of obstacles that we face and a lot of adversity that we have to overcome. I think what really mattered for me is that moment when I realized that I need to stop fitting in so I
Mhm.
can start standing out and start looking at, what makes you different. Ask, what makes me me? Who am I, and what can I do? What can I offer? What are my unique strengths, and how can I use those as my advantage and use that to, get, farther in life, or, your overall mission, whether that's, a certain job aspiration or milestone, whatever. What makes you you? And for me, I didn't want to start, being like following the flock of sheep going this way. I was that one sheep that kind of decided to, you know what, I'm gonna stop fitting in so I can start standing out, and that kind of let me become who I am today. So whether that's your hyper focus, if people are, for neurodivergent individuals, or attention to detail, critical thinking, these aren't necessarily flaws. They're tools that can help you change the world. And the fact that not everyone has these makes them even more unique. So whatever that is, your uniqueness is your greatest asset. So own it and use that to embrace your strengths and turn that into something that you can use to change the world.
So powerful. Now I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here, Shaun. You know that I am enamored with the topic of perfectionism in all different kinds of ways. I'm curious to know if you've ever struggled with perfectionism.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a perfectionist, through and through, and it's not already kind of been known. Anything I kind of mentioned, a lot of the skills that I taught myself to overcome my adversity, I was perfectionist at every single one of them. I taught myself a lot of these skills, but I wasn't satisfied until I was perfect at it. And and then if I try something and I when I tried different some things, something that I may not have been most interested in, but like dancing, if I try, I tried learning to dance and all that, and I wasn't very good at it, so I stopped it, and I knew I don't know if I could become perfect at it necessarily, but and a lot of things I learned, it was like Rubik's cube. Okay, well, not only did I learn it, but I was able to solve it like sub 20 seconds. So I'm like, okay, great, this is awesome. And the same thing, just like, flying or drones or photography, videography, and a lot of it, I'm a born bred entrepreneur. So a lot of the skills I kind of got so good at it that I was like, oh, well, I can turn this into a business. How can I like make more out of this? So perfectionism has always been like a constant companion of mine. It's always been like, on my shoulder, kind of controlling me a little bit. But, through every project idea, I want it to be flawless. But I realized that, it holds you back. If you want to be perfect, you can't at everything. It's nearly impossible. And so I had to learn and kind of teach myself how to be perfect at not being perfect and being okay with that. And learning to release the idea of being perfect or being imperfectly perfect, and embracing that idea rather than just being the idea of perfect. So rather than being perfect, embracing progress, iteration, experimentation, and most of all, failure. And for, all your audience members who are entrepreneurs, I'm a serial entrepreneur through and through. I've started 8 different businesses now by, age 23. So not most people start a lot of businesses, but I see an idea, I see the potential, and I want to capitalize on it. But the epitome of being an entrepreneur is failure. You cannot be a successful entrepreneur unless you have failed to some degree and learned from that failure. This is why I tell people, other entrepreneurs I mentor, when you fail as an entrepreneur, it's important and imperative that you fail, not just fail forward so you can learn from that failure and keep going. And so, my challenge to other people and other audience members who might be entrepreneurs is dare to try, dare to fail, because that failure will lead to success. And only true growth happens when you learn and dare to fail. And it's okay to not be perfect, because the idea of being perfectly or imperfectly perfect is the main goal. So you can embrace that progress, learn to fail, and use that to keep going.
It's almost like you read my mind because I heard the word failure and I instantly wanted to ask you your relationship with failure and what an important point. If you are going to do any kind of creative work, there's so much writing on it in
Yeah.
terms of the external validation component of it, right? I am creating this amazing new venture. How is it going to be received by the outside people? Am I going to be validated? Is it perfect enough to then have that external validation.
Right.
So well
Right.
said.
Yeah, I think and another, just to add to that point, I think a lot of people, and I struggle with this too, is relying on what other people think of you and using that to validate your success. And I think that is kind of a real kryptonite for a lot of people. They hinge on other people's thoughts for their to indicate and be indicative of their success. And that's not always necessarily true. And I've had to really learn to overcome that, whether that's learning not to take things personally. And when people say something, whether that's, positive, constructive feedback or whatever, like, okay, well, maybe it's not me. Maybe it's because, they have a lot on their plate too, or they're really stressed out. They have a lot going on in their life, and learning not to take that personally, but also learning that it's, don't worry about what other people think all the time. And that sometimes it's okay to not be perfect in that regard, because for them, whether that's whatever they see as their version of success, it's different for each person. And
Yeah.
so I have to keep reminding myself that try not to think about what other people think so much, even though I know we all inherently do, but try not to let that stop my potential and what we bring to the table.
Well, at the age of 23, you definitely are dropping a lot of wise pearls that we're all receiving. And you're absolutely right. When I look at other people's opinions or feedback or things that I receive, I think two things are really important. One is, who is the person giving you that feedback and what are their sort of intentions that they have declared in the past, right? Who is the person talking? Number one. And number two is, this is a data point. I look at all feedback, all comments that other people share as just data points. I'm going to take that data and see, well, if this is all neutral, how would I react to it? So that has always been really helpful. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to now ask you to kindly share at this age, how have you reimagined success for yourself after going through all that adversity at school and dealing with bullying? And clearly, you are shining in so many different ways. But when you look at the word success in a more deeper way, what does it look like for you?
I think, success isn't necessarily measured by, how one fits in, or as I said, how others see you. I think a lot of people view success as, oh, I'm going to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever, and then people will deem me as successful because I've reached that threshold of success deemed by other people, or fitting in with the societal norms of what success is. You know, Success isn't, oh yeah, you work your whole life and now you're a doctor, you're now successful. Like that is, you're absolutely right. You're successful by that means, but it's not limited. Success isn't limited by that. It's measured more about how you fully show up as yourself. And, don't, the biggest thing about my talk too, that I wanted to hit home is that we need to stop putting people all in the same box.
Mm.
We aren't the same people. Again, like I said before, like we have different brains. We think differently. That's what makes this world so beautiful. And that's what is amazing. I love, that's why I love traveling and seeing other people's cultures and experiencing different things and talking with people and having conversations, because people are amazing. We all have really unique stories and personalities and identities. That's what makes humans such a unique species. I mean, cats or dogs too alike, they have unique personalities, but you look at, humankind as a whole, and it's a beautiful species. That's what makes us who we are. And so we're not limited by just achieving a certain threshold. Be like, oh yeah, you're a doctor, you're successful now. Oh, you're a lawyer, you're now successful officially. Well, what if someone wants to become a comedian or an actor? That's okay too, because if they fully show up as themselves and that's what they are passionate about and that's how they want to make the world a better place, and that's what makes them excited to wake up every day, that's successful. They're being who they are, unapologetically themselves. So for me, it's not just launching companies or, starting another company or working at SpaceX. It's taking the curiosity and the creativity that I have that are my unique strengths and my unique perspective and using them to create a lasting impact and showing up for myself and not hinging my success on what other people think. And a lot of people think that, as an entrepreneur myself, I'm not successful. A lot of people equate entrepreneurs to failures. A lot of people don't, put entrepreneurs in the same tier as doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, but they are. I mean, you think about like the greatest entrepreneurs, like we wouldn't have hardly any of like the technology around us if we didn't have entrepreneurs to think differently and use their curiosity, creativity, unique perspectives to bring that into the world. That is success. And success is not just doing what other people want you to do, but creating value through being authentic and being unapologetically yourself. So for me, I think that's what success means to me. And I'm going to keep doing that until, as long as I'm here. And I think being, having these outcomes, working at SpaceX or launching companies or becoming a doctor or engineer, all that, these are outcomes of success. This is the finished product, I think, for me. If for a little perspective, I think as an analogy, I think, being a doctor or a lawyer or engineer or launching company or all this is the finished, Michelin star plated food plate placed in front of you, but the ingredients used to make that, the hardworking chefs in the back preparing that is what indicates success. That's the curiosity, the creativity, the hard work, tenacity, unique perspectives working together as a team in your head and in the kitchen to create that unique dish that no one else can make. And as a result, it makes this beautiful dish that others can benefit from and see. But a lot of it happens, wise man Brian Bartz, one of our fellow TEDx talkers, he made a really good point that what indicates success for a lot of these champions, Olympians and writers and athletes, all this, it's not just the milestone. I mean, a lot of Olympians, like you said, aren't crying tears of joy for getting that gold medal, that podium. They're crying the tears of joy for waking up at 6 a.m. for the past 4 years every day to train their butt off to get to that point. And it's thanking themselves for being unapologetically who they are every day, showing up when no one else is there. And no one sees that. No one, I mean, some people might see it, but like a lot of people don't know like how much hard work goes into it. No one knows really how much hard work goes into starting a company. I spend a lot of hard work on my companies with Airmage Media Productions and Chubby's Chow right now, but people will see it when it's out in the stores, when people can benefit from it. But a lot of them don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And I think for me, success is reimagined not just on the stage, but behind the curtain when no one's seeing what's actually happening and what's the ingredients and the maestro behind it all. And that's the true value, I think, of success.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your journey with us today, and going into some of these spaces which are very uncomfortable as you talk about your past childhood experiences. So I really appreciate that, John.
Of
What
course.
Where's the best place for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so definitely go check out my TEDx talk online. Obviously, if you want to hear the whole story, I really just pour it out there for the world to see. So go check that out. You can share that with any. Really, just I want that to be a platform to share that with the world, and to help break down the stigma around autism and ADHD. I think we've done a good job the last decade or so helping to break down the stigma around depression and anxiety, but there's a lot of work to be done around autism and ADHD. So give that a watch. Share it with anyone you know who might be on the spectrum, have ADHD, ADD, OCD, or other neuroatypical conditions, or people who don't know much about it. And so we could really help create a more inclusive, understanding, supportive global community. So that's available at TEDx.com or YouTube. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at just /Shaun Deardorff, and also on Instagram at Shaun Deardorff as well. You can also check out if you want to kind of see how I channel my creativity and innovation, entrepreneurialism, and persistence into real world impact, go check out my company, Airmage Media Productions, or at Airmage Media on Instagram. And we provide, we do all sorts of stuff between commercial, videography, photography, private as well, photography, videography, from headshots and weddings and graduations to full commercials for Toyota, Marriott, beyond. So that's kind of how I channel a lot of that, and in combining my background in aerospace with creativity, which I think a lot of that's a whole other talk. There is our lack of creativity and art within STEM. I think I like to emphasize STEAM more than just STEM, and the impact of necessity for art within STEM. That's why I kind of, the Airmerge Media is a cross section between STEM and creativity, by integrating drone and bringing that into media production and marketing to really help bring that to life. So we specialize in drone video and photo, and then we'll be having a dog food company launching later this year. So feel free to follow us too at Chubby's Chow for that journey if you have dogs. We loved your feedback there. So feel free to give me a follow on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I'll catch you in that side.
You might believe you don't have the time or energy to focus on yourself, but this is exactly the right time to get serious about your well-being. You don't have to do it all alone. I'm here to help. If you enjoyed this video and are ready to take the next step, head over to dramnashabbir.com, where you'll find free resources you can access right away. The website link is below. Let's get started on your path to thriving.